Chapter 1. The Invitation to the Game. Hercule Poirot adjusted the knot of his perfectly tied silk tie and surveyed his reflection in the mirror of his suite at the Pera Palace Hotel in Istanbul. It was a crisp autumn evening in 1934, and the air carried the faint scent of the Bosphorus, mingled with the aroma of strong Turkish coffee from the lobby below. Poirot, ever meticulous, smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his immaculate black jacket. At 60-odd years, the little Belgian detective prided himself on order and method, and nothing displeased him more than disarray, whether in a room, a crime, or the folds of his own moustache. He had come to Istanbul for what he had intended to be a brief respite after a taxing case in Syria. Yet respite, as Poirot often reflected with a wry smile, had a habit of eluding him. Only that morning, a liveried messenger had delivered an envelope to his suite. The paper was heavy, cream-coloured, embossed with a discreet golden crest, 2 crossed playing cards, a spade and a heart, beneath the words, "The Orient Bridge Tournament." Poirot turned the invitation over in his delicate hands. It was addressed to him personally. Monsieur Hercule Poirot, the renowned detective. The note inside was brief, but elegantly worded. Dear Monsieur Poirot, it is with the greatest pleasure that the Orient Bridge Society invites you to participate in an exclusive bridge tournament aboard the Simplon Orient Express, departing Istanbul tomorrow evening. 12 of the finest players in Europe have been selected, and we would be honoured if you would join us as our 13th guest, not merely as a player, but as a distinguished observer of human nature. The prize, 50,000 Swiss francs to the winning partnership. The stakes, higher than mere money, some say. Your presence would lend the event an unparalleled distinction. With highest regards, Victor Armand Chairman. Orient Bridge Society. Poirot's green eyes twinkled. Bridge! He enjoyed the game immensely, not for the gambling, which he considered vulgar, but for the exquisite exercise of logic, memory, and psychology it demanded. And this tournament promised something more: intrigue. The phrase, higher than mere money, lingered in his mind like the faint scent of danger. He had heard whispers of the Orient Bridge Society, a secretive circle of wealthy enthusiasts who organized private, high-stakes games across Europe. Membership was by invitation only, and the players were said to include industrialists, aristocrats, even minor royalty. Why invite a detective? Poirot stroked his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Perhaps they merely wished to boast of his presence. Or perhaps something else. By evening, Poirot had accepted. A telegram was sent, and his faithful valet George began packing with military precision. The following day found Poirot at the Şirkeci station, where the Simplon Orient Express waited like a gleaming serpent of steel and luxury. The platform buzzed with porters in blue uniforms, travellers in furs and feathered hats, and the hiss of steam. Poirot presented his ticket to the conductor, a tall, impassive man named Pierre Michel, and was escorted to the Calais Istanbul coach, where the tournament was to be held in a specially reserved salon car. The salon car was a marvel. Mahogany panels polished to a mirror shine, crystal sconces casting warm light, and a long central table already set with green baize cloths, score pads, and silver card trays. Comfortable armchairs were arranged in groups of 4, and at the far end stood a small bar tended by a white-jacketed steward. Poirot took his seat near a window and observed his fellow passengers as they arrived. First came a tall, broad-shouldered American with a loud voice and a diamond pinky ring. Mr. Samuel Ratchet, a businessman from Chicago, Poirot learned from overheard conversation. Ratchet was accompanied by a nervous-looking secretary, Mr. McQueen, and a valet who hovered silently. Next entered a striking woman in her 30s, draped in sable and diamonds. Mrs. Caroline Hubbard, an American actress of some fame, chattering animatedly about her latest role in Paris. She was followed by a severe Russian princess, Dragomirov, ancient and imperious, leaning on an ebony cane and attended by a meek German lady's maid named Hildegard Schmidt. A young English couple arrived, Colonel Arbuthnot, stiff and military in bearing, and Miss Mary Debenham, cool and composed, with thoughtful grey eyes. They exchanged polite nods, but little more. Then came the Swedes, a shy missionary named Greta Olsen, and finally a portly Italian gentleman named Antonio Foscarelli, who gestured extravagantly as he spoke of fast cars and faster women. The host, Victor Armand, appeared last, a suave Frenchman in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He greeted Poirot warmly. "Monsieur Poirot, what an honour! We are all agog that you accepted. Allow me to introduce our final player, Count Andrigny, and his wife, the Countess Elena." The Count was handsome and aristocratic, his young wife veiled and silent, her golden hair catching the light. They took their seats quietly. As the train pulled out of Istanbul with a gentle lurch, the Bosphorus glittering in the twilight beyond the windows, Victor Armand clapped his hands for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "welcome to the inaugural Orient Bridge tournament. We shall play rubber bridge in rotating partnerships over the next 3 nights. The winning pair will claim the prize at our journey's end in Calais. But remember, bridge is a game of trust and deception. One must read one's partner as carefully as one's opponents." Laughter rippled through the car. Cards were shuffled, drinks poured. Poirot accepted a small glass of sirop de cassis and watched as the first hands were dealt. The early rounds were light-hearted. Mrs. Hubbard bid boldly and often overbid, laughing at her own mistakes. Colonel Arbuthnot played with military precision, while Mary Debenham's cool calculation won several tricks. Mr. Ratchet played aggressively, slamming cards down with unnecessary force, his face reddening when he lost. Poirot himself partnered first with Princess Dragomirov, who played with ruthless efficiency and a complete lack of small talk. "3 no trumps," she declared in a voice like gravel. And Poirot smiled inwardly. He enjoyed the old woman's directness. As night fell and the train thundered across the Turkish countryside, the atmosphere grew more charged. Money changed hands discreetly. Though the prize was the official stake, side bets were clearly in play. Poirot noted the tension in Ratchet's jaw when he lost a rubber to the Andrignys. The way Countess Elena's hand trembled slightly as she gathered her winnings. Later, as players retired to their compartments, Poirot lingered in the salon car, sipping coffee. The steward cleared away glasses, and the train's rhythmic clatter filled the silence. Poirot's little grey cells were already at work. There was something not quite right about this gathering. Why had Ratchet glanced nervously at the door whenever certain passengers entered? Why did Mary Debenham avoid looking directly at Colonel Arbuthnot during play? And why had Victor Armand watched the American with such particular intensity? The detective set down his cup with a soft clink. He had come for bridge and relaxation. But Hercule Poirot suspected that once again, murder, or something very like it, was about to be dealt into the game. Chapter 2. Assembling the Players. The Simplon Orient Express thundered westward through the night. its wheels singing a steady rhythm on the rails as it crossed into Bulgaria. Dawn broke pale and misty over the Balkan hills, and by breakfast time, the tournament salon car was already alive with anticipation. White-jacketed stewards served coffee, croissants and silver pots of hot chocolate, while passengers drifted in, some fresh-faced, others heavy-eyed from late-night side games in their compartments. Hercule Poirot entered precisely at 8 o'clock, immaculately attired in a charcoal-grey suit with a pale lilac waistcoat. He greeted Victor Armand with a courteous bow and accepted a seat at a small table near the window. From here, he could observe everyone without appearing to stare, an art he had perfected long ago. The players assembled slowly, each arrival adding a new thread to the intricate tapestry Poirot was already weaving in his mind. First came Mr. Samuel Ratchet, the American businessman. He strode in as though he owned the train itself, barking an order for black coffee and bacon. His broad face was florid, his eyes small and shrewd beneath heavy brows. He was dressed expensively but without taste. A checked suit too loud for the confines of a railway carriage, a diamond tie-pin that flashed aggressively in the morning light. His secretary, Hector McQueen, trailed behind him. A thin, anxious young man with nervous hands and a habit of glancing at his employer for approval. Ratchet's valet, a silent Englishman named Masterman, followed at a discreet distance and took up station near the door. "Morning, folks," Ratchet boomed, dropping into a chair with a thud that made the crystal glasses tremble. "Hope you all slept well. Big day ahead. Gonna take every dollar on this table before we hit Paris." A few polite murmurs answered him. Poirot noted that Princess Dragomirov merely raised one aristocratic eyebrow and continued sipping her tea. Next entered Mrs. Caroline Hubbard, swathed in a peacock-blue dressing gown and chattering without pause. My goodness, what a night! The rocking of this train! I declare I dreamed I was on a boat crossing the Atlantic. And the noise? Did anyone else hear that strange thumping around midnight? I nearly rang for the conductor. She beamed around the car, but Poirot saw several passengers exchange fleeting glances. Mrs. de Hubbard's compartment, he recalled from the wagon-lit plan, adjoined Mr. Ratchet's. Colonel Arbuthnot and Miss Mary Debenham arrived together, though not quite together. The colonel held the door for her with old-fashioned courtesy, but she passed through without acknowledgement, her cool grey eyes fixed on some distant point. Arbuthnot, tall, sunburned, with a soldier's straight back, took a seat opposite Poirot, and unfolded the Times with deliberate care. Miss Debenham, elegant in a simple wool travelling dress, accepted coffee and settled beside Mrs. Hubbard, who immediately engaged her in animated conversation about Paris fashions. The Andrenyes appeared shortly after. Count Andreny, dark and intense, guiding his veiled wife with a protective hand on her elbow. The Countess Elena was exquisite. Golden hair, porcelain skin, huge dark eyes that seemed perpetually startled. She spoke little, answering her husband in soft Hungarian when he translated for the company. They sat apart from the others, a small island of foreign aristocracy. Antonio Foscarelli burst in next, all Latin exuberance. The Italian automobile enthusiast wore a camel hair coat despite the warmth of the carriage, and kissed Mrs. Hubbard's hand with theatrical flair. "Bellissima! You grow more radiant with every mile we travel," he declared. Mrs. Hubbard giggled like a girl. Greta Olsen, the Swedish missionary, entered quietly and took a seat near the Princess Dragomirov. She was plain and earnest, her fair hair scraped back severely, her eyes kind but anxious. she greeted everyone with a shy smile and accepted only tea. Finally, the German lady's maid Hildegard Schmidt appeared, carrying a small sewing basket. She was a large, stolid woman with an expressionless face. Princess Dragomirov summoned her with a flick of one bony finger, and Schmidt took up position behind her mistress's chair like a sentinel. Victor Armand clapped his hands once the company was complete. "Excellent! Everyone is present! Today we begin the serious play. We have drawn partnerships randomly for the first session." He produced a silver bowl containing folded slips of paper. North-south pairs will remain fixed for the morning. East-west will rotate every 6 boards. The draw was made amid light-hearted protests and laughter. Poirot found himself partnered with Mrs. Hubbard against Colonel Arbuthnot and Antonio Foscarelli. Mr. Ratchet drew Princess Dragomirov, a pairing that caused visible consternation on the American's face, while the Andrenyis were partnered against Mary Debenham and Greta Olson. McQueen, Masterman, and Schmidt were excused from play, but remained in the car as observers. The first rubber began. Poirot played with his usual precision, bidding conservatively and defending with exquisite timing. Mrs. Hubbard, however, was a whirlwind of enthusiasm and error. She overbid repeatedly, trumped her partner's ace with glee, and apologized profusely after every disaster. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I'm just terrible," she cried after one particularly catastrophic contract. "But isn't it fun?" Poirot smiled politely. "Madame, in bridge as in life, enthusiasm is charming. Accuracy, however, is essential." Across the room, tension crackled at the Ratchet Dragomirov table. The princess played in icy silence, her bids delivered like royal commands. Ratchet grew increasingly agitated, slamming his cards down and muttering under his breath. At one point, he accused the old woman of revoking, a serious charge. Princess Dragomirov fixed him with a stare that would have frozen wine. "You are mistaken, monsieur," she said in her deep, accented voice. "Or perhaps your eyes, like your manners, are failing you." Ratchet flushed crimson, but said nothing more. Poirot noticed McQueen lean forward anxiously, as though to intervene, then think better of it. Between hands conversation flowed, or failed to. Mary Debenham spoke quietly with Greta Olson about missionary work in Africa, but her eyes frequently strayed to Colonel Arbuthnot. The colonel himself remained buried in his newspaper, though Poirot observed that he turned fewer pages than one might expect from genuine reading. During a break for luncheon, Poirot found himself alone for a moment with Victor Armand near the bar. "An interesting gathering, monsieur," Poirot remarked, swirling his glass of mineral water. "Such varied personalities. Tell me, how were the invitations decided upon?" Armand smiled smoothly. "A combination of skill and, shall we say, notoriety. We sought players who would make the tournament memorable. Mr. Ratchet, for instance, is reputed to be one of the wealthiest men in America. The princess is bridge royalty. And you, my dear Poirot, your reputation precedes you everywhere. And the prize," Poirot murmured, 50,000 Swiss francs, a considerable sum." Armand's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, though for some of our players, money is merely counters in a larger game." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A larger game? How intriguing!" But Armand only laughed softly and moved away to speak with the steward. As the afternoon session began, the train plunged into a tunnel, plunging the carriage momentarily into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Poirot noticed that Countess Elena's hand trembled violently as she picked up her cards. Her husband whispered something fierce in Hungarian, and she steadied herself with visible effort. Later, during a quiet moment, Poirot overheard a snatch of conversation between McQueen and his employer in the corridor outside the salon. "Can't be sure it's any of them, sir," McQueen was saying urgently. "It might just be coincidence." "Don't be a fool," Ratchet snarled. "I know what I know, and if anything happens, the rest was lost as they moved away." By evening, as the train approached the outskirts of Sofia, scores were tallied. The Andrenys led comfortably, followed by Arbuthnot and Foscarelli. Ratchet and the Princess languished near the bottom, much to the American's ill-concealed fury. Dinner was served in the dining car, but Poirot chose to take a light supper in his compartment. As he passed through the corridor, he noticed Mr. Ratchet standing outside his own compartment door, staring fixedly at something down the passage. When Poirot approached, Ratchet started violently and retreated inside, slamming the door. Back in his compartment, Poirot sat for a long time in thoughtful silence, his small green eyes gleaming in the lamplight. So many tensions, so many secrets. The pieces were assembling themselves, but the picture remained obscure. And somewhere in the darkness outside, snow had begun to fall, heavily, relentlessly, blanketing the tracks ahead. Tomorrow, Poirot reflected, the real game would begin. Chapter 3. The Deadly Deal. The second night aboard the Simplon Orient Express was bitterly cold. Heavy snow had begun to fall as the train climbed into the mountains between Sofia and Belgrade, and by midnight the landscape outside the windows was a swirling white void. Inside the tournament salon car, however, the atmosphere was feverish. Lamps burned brightly, cigars glowed, and the green baize tables were littered with score sheets, ashtrays, and half-empty glasses. The serious bridge had begun. Victor Armand had declared the evening session a championship rubber, double stakes, no rotation of partners for the full set of 32 boards. The room had been rearranged into 3 tables of 4, with Poirot and the non-players observing from side chairs. The pairings were Table 1, Mr. Ratchet and Princess Dragomirov versus Count and Countess Andreny. Table 2, Colonel Arbuthnot and Mary Debenham versus Antonio Foscarelli and Greta Olson. Table 3, Mrs. Caroline Hubbard and Hildegard Schmidt, drafted as a substitute, versus Victor Armand himself and Pierre Michel, the conductor, who had revealed himself as an excellent player off-duty. Poirot sat quietly near the bar, a small notebook on his knee, ostensibly recording scores, but in reality, noting every glance, every hesitation, every bead of sweat. The tension in the car was almost palpable. Money was no longer changing hands discreetly. Large denomination notes lay openly beside several players. Ratchet, in particular, played as though possessed, bidding aggressively, doubling recklessly, and growling when tricks went against him. At Table 1, the atmosphere was arctic. Princess Dragomirov played with her usual icy precision, but Ratchet's temper frayed with every lost rubber. The Andrenyes, by contrast, were a study in harmony. The Count bidding smoothly, the Countess playing the cards with delicate accuracy. They were steadily amassing points. Around 11 o'clock, the steward announced that coffee and liqueurs would be served. Players stretched, lit fresh cigarettes, and moved about the car. Poirot noticed Mr. Ratchet rise heavily and approach Victor Armand near the door to the corridor. "I need a word," Ratchet muttered, his voice low but carrying in the sudden quiet. Armand smiled politely. "Of course, monsieur. In private?" They stepped out into the corridor. Through the glass panel in the door, Poirot saw Ratchet speaking urgently, his thick finger jabbing the air. Armand listened impassively, then shook his head once. Ratchet's face darkened, and he returned to the salon alone, slamming the door behind him. Play resumed. The decisive hand came just after midnight. Table 1 had reached board 29. The Count dealing announced Chicago scoring for the final rubber. Ratchet North picked up a powerful hand, the ace-king-queen of spades, solid hearts, and scattered minor suit strength. He opened 2 spades, aggressive but justifiable. Princess Dragomirov, his partner, held a balanced 14 points and responded 3 clubs. The Countess, due West, passed. The Count South held a monster. 7 spades to the Jack-10, the Ace-King of Hearts, and Singleton Diamond. He leapt straight to 4 spades over Ratchet's rebid. Ratchet glared across the table. "Double!" he snapped. The princess raised a skeletal hand. "Redouble!" The room fell silent. Even the other tables paused. A redoubled contract at the 4 level was rare. The penalties, if it failed, would be catastrophic. The Countess led the King of Diamonds, dummy. Ratchet's hand went down with a thud. North, Ratchet, spades, AKQ J3 hearts. QJ 10 diamonds, 54 clubs. KQJ South, Count Andrenyi, spades, Cento 9 8 7 6 5 2 hearts. AK diamonds, a clubs, A10. The Count claimed 12 tricks immediately, 7 spades, 2 hearts, 2 clubs, and a diamond rough and dummy. Game and rubber, redoubled with an overtrick. The score, 2,800 points. Enough to wipe out Ratchet's earlier gains and plunge him deep into deficit. Ratchet stared at the table as though he could not believe his eyes. Then, slowly, he pushed back his chair and stood. "You set me up," he said, his voice thick with rage. He pointed a shaking finger at the Count. "You and your damn wife. You knew exactly what I had." The Count regarded him coolly. "Monsieur, bridge is a game of information. You announced your strength. I believed you." Princess Dragomirov gathered the cards with deliberate calm. "You bid your hand, monsieur. My redouble was disciplined. You have no one to blame but yourself." Ratchet's face was purple. For a moment, Poirot thought the American might strike someone. Instead, he swept his remaining notes into his pocket, muttered something unintelligible, and stormed towards the door. "I'm done for tonight," he snarled. "Deal me out." The door slammed behind him. A collective exhale rippled through the car. Victor Armand rose smoothly. "Perhaps a short recess is in order. Coffee, anyone?" Players dispersed. Countess Elena looked pale and excused herself, her husband guiding her out. Colonel Arbuthnot lit a cigarette and stared out at the snow. Mary Debenham's eyes followed Ratchet's departing back with an expression Poirot could not quite read. 15 minutes later, play resumed without Ratchet. Princess Dragomirov partnered Victor Armand for the final boards. And the session ended quietly around 1:30. Passengers began drifting to their compartments. Poirot lingered, chatting idly with the conductor, Pierre Michel, about the difficulties of running a train in heavy snow. At 2 o'clock the salon car was empty, save for the steward clearing glasses. Poirot decided to retire. As he passed along the corridor toward his sleeping car, he noticed that the door to compartment 7, Mr. Ratchet's, was ajar. A thin line of light showed beneath it, and faint sounds emerged, a low murmur, as though someone was speaking on the telephone, though the train had no such facility. Poirot paused, his hand on the brass rail. The voice inside was Ratchet's, hoarse, agitated. "Tell them I'll pay double, no triple, if they keep me safe till Paris, you hear me? I know they're on this train, all of them." A pause. Then, more desperately, Just get me off at the next stop if you have to. I don't care about the money anymore." Another silence. Ratchet's voice dropped to a whisper Poirot could no longer distinguish. Then the click of a receiver, perhaps an imaginary one, and the creak of bedsprings. Poirot moved on quietly to his own compartment 2 doors down. He undressed methodically, placed his clothes on the hanger with precision, and climbed into the narrow berth. But sleep did not come easily. The little detective lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the train laboured through the storm. Outside, the snow fell thicker than ever. Somewhere in the mountains ahead, drifts were piling high across the tracks. At 3:17 a.m., Poirot noted the exact time on his travelling clock. The train lurched violently, brakes screaming. Carriages jolted together with a metallic crash. Poirot sat up, clutching the side of the berth. For several minutes the train shuddered and groaned, then came to a complete halt. Silence fell, broken only by the howl of wind. In the morning, the steward would knock on every door with the news that the Orient Express was snowbound, stuck fast in a drift miles from any station. But long before that, in the cold, silent hours before dawn, something far more deadly than snow had occurred. In compartment 7, Samuel Ratchet lay fully dressed across his bed, the sheets soaked dark with blood. 12 stab wounds pierced his chest and side, some shallow, some deep, some delivered with frantic force, others with chilling precision. The murder on the Orient Bridge had been dealt, and Hercule Poirot, only 2 doors away, had heard nothing at all. Chapter 4. Poirot's first observations' morning light filtered weakly through frost-laced windows, as the Orient Express lay immobilized in a vast white sea of snow. The train had come to rest in a narrow cutting between steep, pine-covered slopes, somewhere in the wilds of Yugoslavia. Drifts rose higher than the carriages on the windward side, and the engine, far ahead, puffed futilely against the blockade. Passengers, wrapped in coats and scarves, gathered in the dining car for breakfast, murmuring about delays and telegrams to Paris connections. Hercule Poirot took his usual small table and ordered coffee and a single croissant. He appeared calm, even cheerful, but his eyes missed nothing. The atmosphere was subdued. The previous night's bridge triumph already felt distant. Victor Armand had announced that play would resume once the snow was cleared, but no one spoke of cards now. At 8:30, Hector McQueen burst into the dining car, his face ashen. "Mr. Ratchet, he's not answering. I've knocked and knocked. The door's locked from the inside, and Masterman says he heard nothing all night." A hush fell. Colonel Arbuthnot rose at once. "I'll come with you." Pierre Michel, the conductor, hurried forward, keys jangling. Poirot set down his cup with deliberate care and followed. They proceeded along the corridor to compartment 7. Michel knocked firmly. No answer. He knocked again, calling, "Monsieur! Monsieur Ratchet!" Still silence. Michel glanced at McQueen, who nodded urgently. The conductor selected a key and unlocked the door, but the night latch was bolted from within. With McQueen's help, he forced it back. The compartment was in darkness, curtains drawn. A single lamp burned dimly on the wall. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Samuel Ratchet lay sprawled across the lower berth, still in evening dress. His jacket and waistcoat were unbuttoned. His shirt soaked crimson. 12 wounds gaped in his chest and side, some shallow, some deep, one so savage it had pierced to the heart. His right hand still clutched a crumpled handkerchief. His left arm hung limply toward the floor. On the small fold-down table lay a half-empty glass of water and a phial labelled "Solution of Chloral Hydrate." McQueen staggered back with a strangled cry. Arbuthnot swore softly. Michel crossed himself. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure suddenly commanding. "Touch nothing, monsieur. The body must remain exactly as it is." He surveyed the scene with swift professional intensity. The window was closed and latched. The door had been locked and bolted from inside. No weapon was visible. The bedclothes were scarcely disturbed, suggesting Ratchet had been attacked while lying down. A pocket watch on the chain across his waistcoat had stopped at 1:15, shattered, perhaps by one of the blows. Poirot bent closer. Several wounds appeared to have been inflicted by a left-handed person, others by a right-handed one. Curious, very curious. On the floor near the window lay a scrap of burned paper, only a few charred fragments remaining. Poirot retrieved them carefully with tweezers from his travelling case and placed them in an envelope. Enough survived to read the words, "Remember little Daisy Armstrong." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The Armstrong case! A notorious kidnapping in America some years earlier, a child murdered, a mother driven to suicide, the family destroyed. The criminal had never been caught. And Ratchet, the name had always struck Poirot as assumed. Could this be Cassetti, the gangster responsible? He straightened and turned to the others. "Monsieur McQueen, when did you last see your employer alive?" "About 10:30, monsieur. He sent me to fetch some papers from his valise in the baggage car. When I returned at 11, he said he was going to bed and told me not to disturb him." "And you heard nothing during the night?" "Nothing. I slept soundly. My compartment is at the far end of the next coach." Arbuthnot spoke up. "The train stopped around 3, I think. I looked out. Nothing but snow. Went back to sleep." Michel nodded. "The stop was at 3:17 exactly. A signal against us. Then the drift blocked us completely. No one could have left or boarded the train since then." Poirot turned to the valet masterman, who had appeared silently in the doorway. "And you, monsieur?" "I prepared Mr. Ratchet's compartment at 10:30. He took his usual sleeping draught. I retired to my own berth opposite." Poirot examined the communicating door between Ratchet's compartment and the next, occupied by Mrs. Hubbard. It was bolted on Ratchet's side, but not on hers. Next he inspected the wounds more closely. The variety of force and angle suggested either great agitation or, more intriguingly, more than one assailant. Finally, he noticed something glinting beneath the pillow. A small embroidered handkerchief with the initial H. "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "A lady's handkerchief." He pocketed it carefully. The 3 men, Michel, Arbuthnot, and a local Yugoslav doctor, summoned by radio from a nearby village, carried the body to an empty compartment converted into a temporary morgue. The doctor's preliminary examination confirmed death between midnight and 2 a.m., probably closer to 1. By 10 o'clock, the passengers had been informed. Shock rippled through the train like a cold wind. Mrs. Hubbard was particularly distraught, declaring she had heard noises next door and insisting her own communicating door had been tried in the night. Princess Dragomirov received the news with icy composure. "The man was a pig," she said simply. "One does not grieve for pigs." Countess Eleanor fainted and had to be revived with smelling salts. Poirot requested that all passengers remain in their compartments until he had spoken to each in turn. He enlisted the help of Dr. Constantine, the Greek physician travelling on the train, and Monsieur Bouc, a director of the Wagonlitz company who happened to be aboard and was an old friend. Together they examined Ratchet's luggage. In a locked briefcase, they found a large sum in various currencies, and, most significantly, a grease-stained automatic pistol that had not been fired. In the pocket of Ratchet's jacket, Poirot discovered a small notebook. Several pages had been torn out, but one entry remained. A list of names, some crossed through. Poirot read them aloud to Bouc and Constantine. Arbuthnot, Debenham, Andrenier, Foscarelli, Masterman, Schmidt, Olsen, Hubbard, Dragomirov. All passengers from the bridge tournament, except Poirot himself and Victor Armand. Bouc whistled. Mon Dieu, he suspected them all. Or, said Poirot quietly, someone wished us to believe he did. Back in the salon car, now cleared for the investigation, Poirot examined the bridge records from the previous night. The final rubber, the disastrous redoubled 4 spades, had ended at 12:47 a.m. Ratchet had stormed out minutes later. The last players, Armand and Michel, had left the salon at 1:30. Poirot tapped the scoresheet thoughtfully. The time of death is between midnight and 2, yet everyone has an alibi of sorts. The train is a closed circle, and the snow ensures no outsider could have come aboard. He looked out at the endless white landscape. 12 stab wounds, he mused. 12 wounds from different hands, perhaps? Or one person striking with both hands to confuse us. And this handkerchief, monogram H. We have 2 ladies whose names begin with H, Mrs. Hubbard and Hildegard Schmidt. Yet the handkerchief is fine cambric, expensive, not the sort a lady's maid would own. Dr. Constantine shook his head. It is impossible, my friend. Everyone on this train is accounted for. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Impossible? No. Docteur. Improbable, yes. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in impossible crimes. Only in crimes that have not yet been properly understood. He stood smoothing his moustache. Now we begin the interviews. One by one, we shall lay our cards on the table and see who bluffs. Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing the Orient Express in its frozen tomb. The game had changed. Bridge was forgotten. Murder was now the only hand being played. Chapter 5. Alibis and Deceptions. The salon car had been transformed into a makeshift courtroom. The bridge tables were pushed together to form a long central surface, green baize replaced by a crisp white tablecloth. Afternoon light slanted through the frost-rimed windows, casting pale rectangles across the floor. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, but the train remained entombed in its white prison, the track ahead still blocked. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the table, flanked by Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine. Before him lay his notebook, the scorched scrap of paper, the delicate handkerchief with its monogram H, and the bridge score sheets from the fatal night. The passengers filed in one by one, summoned by Pierre Michel. Each took the same seat facing Poirot, answered questions, and left, some calmly, some visibly shaken. Poirot began with Hector McQueen. The young secretary was pale and fidgety, his tie askew. "You were Mr. Ratchet's confidant, monsieur. Did he speak to you of enemies?" McQueen hesitated. He was nervous. Said he'd received threatening letters. He thought someone was following him from New York to Istanbul. That's why he hired extra protection in Turkey, but let them go when he boarded the train. And the name Cassetti, did it mean anything to him? McQueen's eyes widened. How did you— Yes, that was his real name. Cassetti, the Armstrong kidnapper. He escaped justice in America, changed his identity, made another fortune. He knew some of the family might still want revenge. Yet he came to Europe openly. He thought enough time had passed. But lately, he was jumpy. Your movements last night. I left him at 11, worked on accounts in the dining car until nearly 1. The steward can confirm. Then to my compartment, number 4, next coach, slept until the train stopped. Next, Masterman, the valet, impassive, correct. I prepared Monsieur's bed at 10:30. He took his sleeping draught, chloral hydrate, heavy dose. I sat outside his door until midnight, reading, heard nothing unusual. Retired opposite, compartment 8. You are ex-military? Army Service Corps, sir? Poirot nodded and dismissed him. Mrs. Caroline Hubbard burst in next, voluble and tearful. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, it's just awful. Poor man, right next door. I hardly slept a wink. Around 1 o'clock, I heard the most dreadful noises, thumps and groans. And then someone tried my communicating door. I screamed and rang the bell, but no one came. I was terrified. You are certain of the time? Positive. My watch said 1:10. Poirot held up the handkerchief. This was found in the victim's compartment. The initial is H. Is it yours, madame? Mrs. Hubbard peered at it. Why, it looks just like one of mine. I have several with H. Hubbard, you know. But I've mislaid one. Goodness! Do you think the murderer planted it there to incriminate me? Perhaps, madame. Or perhaps not. Colonel Arbuthnot followed, erect, controlled, but with a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. I was in the smoking compartment with Mr. Foscarelli and Dr. Constantine until about 2. Then to bed, compartment 15, heard nothing. You knew the Armstrong family? Arbuthnot stiffened. I did. Served with Colonel Armstrong in India. Fine man. The child's death broke him. His wife never recovered. And you were in America at the time of the kidnapping? I was not. But if you're asking whether I'd have killed Cassetti given the chance, yes, I would. Gladly, but I did not. Mary Debenham entered next, pale but composed, her grey eyes steady. I retired at 11:30 after the bridge. Shared compartment 11 with Miss Olson. We talked until perhaps 12:30, then slept. The communicating door to Mrs. Hubbard was bolted on our side. You were governess to the Armstrong children before Daisy. Miss Debenham's composure cracked for the first time. I was governess to the elder sister. I was in the house the night Daisy was taken. I found Mrs. Armstrong after she jumped. If you want motive, monsieur, I have it, but I did not kill him. Greta Olson confirmed Miss Debenham's alibi tearfully. We prayed together before sleeping. I'm a light sleeper. I would have heard if she left. Princess Dragomirov was carried in on a chair by Hildegard Schmidt. She regarded Poirot with imperious disdain. I despised the man. He cheated at cards. He was a swine. But I did not kill him. I retired at 12:45. Schmidt undressed me and sat outside my door, compartment 14, until morning. And the handkerchief? The old princess examined it. Not mine. My initials are N.D., Natalia Dragomirov, but it is the sort given to a godchild. I gave one like it many years ago, to Sonia Armstrong. Her married name began with H. Hubbard? No, something else. Golden hair. Hungarian. Princess Dragomirov's eyes narrowed. Elena Goldenberg. Sonia Armstrong's younger sister. She married a Hungarian count, but the countess here is dark. Poirot's gaze sharpened. We shall see. Hildegard Schmidt followed, stolid, nervous. I sat outside Princess's door from 12:30 onward. Heard nothing. That handkerchief could be mine. Many ladies have similar. But I did not lose one. Antonio Foscarelli was voluble. I play cards late with Colonel and Doctor. Then sleep like baby. Ratchet? A bad man. In America, He ruined many Italian families with his rackets, but I no kill him." Count and Countess Andrenyi were last. The Count spoke for both, his English perfect but accented. "My wife took a sleeping potion and retired at 11. I read in the smoking compartment until 1:30, then joined her. Our compartment is 13, next to the victim, but the communicating door was bolted both sides." Poirot turned to the Countess, veiled as always. "Madam, may I see your handkerchiefs?" The Count bristled. "My wife is not well. This is outrageous." But the Countess whispered something in Hungarian. Slowly, she produced a small lace square. Initial E. Poirot examined her passport, then looked up. "Countess, your Christian name is Elena, yes?" "Yes." "And your maiden name?" "Goldenberg." "Elena Goldenberg." Princess Dragomirov's voice cut in from the doorway where she had lingered. "Sonia Goldenberg's sister. I thought the veil and the dye hid you, child. You were always the passionate one." The Countess tore off her veil. Beneath, her golden hair was indeed dyed dark, but her eyes blazed. "Yes, I am Helena Goldenberg, Daisy's aunt. That monster destroyed my family. My sister Sonia died in childbirth because of the grief. I wanted him to suffer." The Count placed a protective arm around her. "My wife is innocent of the murder. She could not have done it." Poirot regarded them thoughtfully. "Perhaps not alone." He dismissed them and turned to Bouc and Constantine. "Every passenger has an alibi, yet every alibi has a flaw. McQueen was alone after 1. Masterman could have left his post. Mrs. Dahone, Hubbard's noises might cover her own movements. The communicating doors, the times overlap strangely." He tapped the bridge score sheets. "Look here. The final rubber ended at 12:47. Ratchet left immediately. Yet the watch was stopped at 1:15, deliberately perhaps to suggest the time of death. The wounds, some left-handed, some right. The burned paper, little Daisy Armstrong. The handkerchief planted to mislead." Bouc threw up his hands. "But how? The train is sealed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Precisely, my friend. The train is sealed. No outsider could enter or leave. Therefore," he paused dramatically, "therefore, the murderer or murderers are still among us. And the bridge tournament itself provided the perfect cover. Rotating partners, late hours, distractions." He rose. "Tomorrow we dig deeper. We examine the luggage again. We test the alibis against the bridge timeline. Someone is lying. Many, perhaps." As the passengers dispersed to their compartments, Poirot lingered, staring at the score sheets. 12 stab wounds, 12 players at the tournament. The little Belgian's moustache twitched. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious indeed." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. The trap was closing. Chapter 6. Unravelling the Partnerships. The third day dawned clear and bitterly cold. Workmen from a nearby village had cleared a path to the train, and a small locomotive was expected to pull the Orient Express free by evening. But for the passengers trapped in their luxurious prison, freedom felt distant. The salon car remained Poirot's headquarters, the bridge tables now covered with evidence, luggage labels, passports, the scorched fragment of paper, and the blood-stained handkerchief. Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled company, his small figure erect, his eyes bright as polished emeralds. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice precise and carrying easily in the hushed carriage. "We approach the truth. Last night I searched every compartment, with your permission, of course, and certain discoveries have been made. It is time to lay all of the cards upon the table, as one says in bridge." He paused, letting the silence stretch. First, the victim was not Samuel Ratchet. He was Cassetti. the murderer of little Daisy Armstrong. This is now known to all of you, or was known before. The burned paper with the words Little Daisy Armstrong was intended to be found. The stopped watch at 1:15 was meant to mislead. The handkerchief with H was planted. All these are what you English call red herrings. A ripple of movement. Countess Helena, her disguise abandoned, golden hair now uncovered, clasped her husband's hand. Poirot continued, "But the wounds, 12 wounds, those are real. Some struck by a right-handed person, some by a left. Some feeble, some forceful. One assassin in a passion? Possible, but improbable? No, 12 wounds suggest 12 assassins, or rather, 12 jurors." Monsieur Bouc gasped. Dr. Constantine leaned forward. "Consider," Poirot said, "the Armstrong tragedy touched many lives. The child murdered. The mother, Sonia Armstrong, died in premature childbirth. The father, Colonel Armstrong, shot himself. A maid, wrongly suspected, threw herself from a window. And the family is shattered." He turned to each in turn. "Princess Dragomirov, you were Sonia Armstrong's godmother. You loved the child as your own." The old woman inclined her head. "I did. Colonel Arbuthnot, you served with Colonel Armstrong. He was your friend." Arbuthnot's jaw tightened. "The best man I ever knew. Miss Debenham, you were governess to the elder Armstrong girl. You were in the house when Daisy was taken." Mary Debenham's eyes filled with tears. "I should have protected her." "Mrs. Hubbard," Poirot's gaze fixed on the American woman. "Or should I say Mrs. Linda Arden?" The chatterbox fell silent. Then, slowly, astonishingly, her entire demeanour changed. The fluttering hands stilled. The voice lost its shrill edge, and became deep, resonant, the voice of a great actress. "Yes," she said quietly, "Linda Arden, of the New York stage. Sonia Armstrong was my daughter. Daisy, my granddaughter." A collective intake of breath. Poirot nodded, and the others each connected. Masterman was Colonel Armstrong's Batman. Hildegard Schmidt was the Armstrong nursery maid, wrongly accused. Greta Olson was Daisy's nurse in the hospital. Antonio Foscarelli, the chauffeur who drove the car the night Daisy was taken, tormented by guilt ever since. Hector McQueen, son of the district attorney who prosecuted the case, devastated when Cassetti escaped justice. He turned to the Andrenius. And Countess Helena, Daisy's aunt, Sonia's younger sister, Count Andreni, married into the tragedy. One by one, the masks fell away. Even Pierre Michel, the conductor, stepped forward. "My sister," he said hoarsely, "was the maid who killed herself." Victor Armand, the suave host, spoke last. "And I organized the tournament. I gathered them all. Cassetti accepted my invitation because he thought it a harmless game among the rich. He never suspected." Poirot raised a hand. "Exactly. You are all connected by blood, loyalty, or grief. You discovered Cassetti was aboard the Orient Express. You arranged, through Monsieur Armand, to be on the same train, in the same coach. The bridge tournament provided perfect cover. Late nights, rotating partners, everyone moving about freely." He paced slowly. "The plan was simple and terrible. After Cassetti took his sleeping draught and retired, you entered his compartment one by one, or in small groups, through the communicating door from Mrs. Hubbard's room. 12 strokes, one from each of you. No single person bore the full guilt. Justice, not murder. A jury of 12, executing its verdict." Silence. Then Princess Dragomirov spoke, her voice like gravel. "He deserved it. The law failed. We did not." Colonel Arbuthnot nodded. "An eye for an eye." Mary Debenham's voice was steady. "Daisy was 3 years old. She trusted him." Mrs. Hubbard, Linda Arden rose, magnificent in her grief. My daughter died screaming his name in her nightmares. My granddaughter was cut to pieces. Tell me, Monsieur Poirot, what would you have done? Poirot regarded them all. The soldier, the princess, the actress, the nurse, the valet, the secretary, the chauffeur, the maid, the conductor, the count and countess, the governess, the host. His little grey cells had pieced it together from 100 small details. The identical pipe cleaners used by Arbuthnot and McQueen. The scarlet kimono seen by Mrs. Hubbard that belonged to the Countess. The button from a conductor's uniform found in Ratchet's compartment. The way alibis overlapped perfectly, each covering another. He had searched the luggage again that morning. In 12 different compartments, he had found traces. A spot of blood on Masterman's cuff, a torn glove in Schmidt's sewing basket, a left-handed dagger hidden in Foscarelli's valise, a right-handed one in Arbuthnot's. All of them. Poirot turned to Monsieur Bouc, who was staring in horror. "My friend," Poirot said quietly, "there are 2 possible solutions to this case. The first, a group of strangers, each with motive, collaborated in cold blood to commit murder. The second, he looked out at the snow-covered landscape. The second, an unknown assassin boarded the train in the night, committed the crime, and vanished into the storm. Impossible, since the tracks show no footprints, and the train was sealed." Bouc understood. "You mean we could present the second solution to the police?" Poirot's eyes were grave. "The Yugoslav police will arrive soon. They will want a simple answer. An outsider? Perhaps a rival gangster. The evidence can be arranged to support it. The planted clues, the stopped watch, the burnt paper." He faced the 12. "Or we tell the truth, and all of you, everyone, will hang." Linda Arden stepped forward. "We are prepared for that." Princess Dragomirov nodded. "We acted together. We will face the consequences together." But Poirot raised a hand. "No," he said softly. "There has been enough death." He turned to Bouc and Dr. Constantine. "Messieurs, I suggest we inform the authorities that Samuel Ratchet was killed by an unknown person who escaped in the night. The wounds vary because the assassin struck in rage and fear. The handkerchief, the paper, these are false clues planted by the killer." Bouc hesitated, then nodded slowly. Dr. Constantine smiled faintly. "A most satisfactory solution." The passengers stared at Poirot in stunned silence. Linda Arden found her voice first. "Why?" Poirot smoothed his moustache. "Because, madame, I do not approve of murder. But in this case, Hercule Poirot understands." He bowed slightly. "The partnerships are dissolved. The game is over." As the rescue locomotive's whistle sounded in the distance, the 12 looked at one another, not as suspects, but as survivors bound by a terrible secret they would carry to their graves. And Hercule Poirot, the little man with the egg-shaped head and the magnificent moustache, turned away to watch the approaching engine. Justice, he reflected, sometimes wears a very strange face. Chapter 7. The Grand Revelation. The rescue locomotive had finally broken through the drifts and pulled the Simplon Orient Express free shortly after dawn. By late afternoon, the train was moving again. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed as it descended from the snowy mountains toward warmer plains. The passengers, however, were not yet free. They sat in the salon car under the watchful eyes of Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine, waiting for Hercule Poirot to speak. The bridge tables had been rearranged into a single long rectangle. Afternoon sunlight, pale and wintry, streamed through the windows and glinted off the silver coffee pots the steward had set out. No one touched them. Poirot entered precisely at 4 o'clock. impeccable in a dark suit and perfectly centered tie. He took his place at the head of the table, placed his small notebook before him, and surveyed the 12 faces turned toward him. Some were pale, some defiant, some simply exhausted. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began quietly, "the Yugoslav police will board at the next station. They will demand a solution to the murder of the man we knew as Samuel Ratchet. It is therefore necessary that we reach our own solution first." He paused, letting his words settle. "There are 2 possible explanations. I shall present both. You will decide which one the world shall hear." He opened his notebook. First solution: an unknown assassin boarded the train during the night, entered compartment 7, stabbed the victim 12 times, and escaped into the snow without leaving a trace. The varying force of the wounds suggests a single killer in a frenzy. The stopped watch, the burned paper, the handkerchief, all planted to confuse the investigation. The train's isolation supports this. No outsider could have reached us. Colonel Arbuthnot gave a short, humorless laugh. "Convenient fiction." "Exactly," said Poirot. "Fiction, but plausible enough for tired policemen who wish only to close a file." He turned the page. Second solution: the truth. A hush fell. Samuel Ratchet was Giovanni Cassetti, the kidnapper and murderer of Daisy Armstrong. Every person in this carriage, except myself, was connected to that tragedy. One by one, Poirot named them. Mrs. Linda Arden, grandmother of the child, mother of Sonia Armstrong. The actress sat very straight, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Countess Helena Goldenberg-Andreni, Daisy's aunt. The young woman's hand trembled in her husband's. Princess Dragomirov, godmother to Sonia Armstrong. The old woman inclined her head regally. Colonel Arbuthnot, comrade in arms of Colonel Armstrong. The soldier met Poirot's gaze steadily. Mary Debenham, governess in the Armstrong household. Miss Debenham's lips pressed into a thin line. Greta Olsen, nurse to Daisy in her final illness. The Swedish woman clasped her hands as if in prayer. Hector McQueen, son of the prosecutor who failed to convict Cassetti. The young man looked suddenly very young. Masterman, Colonel Armstrong's Batman. The valet stood expressionless. Hildegard Schmidt, the Armstrong nursery maid, wrongly accused. The German woman's eyes filled. Antonio Foscarelli, chauffeur on the night of the kidnapping. The Italian spread his hands helplessly. Pierre Michel, brother of the maid who took her own life. The conductor bowed his head, and Monsieur Victor Armand, organizer of the tournament, gatherer of the Avengers. Armand gave a slight, ironic bow. Poirot continued. You discovered Cassetti would be on this train. You arranged to be here together. The bridge tournament was the perfect mask. Late hours, constant movement between tables, excuses to be anywhere. After Cassetti took his heavy sleeping draught and retired, you entered his compartment through Mrs. Hubbard's communicating door. 12 of you, 1 stab from each. No single conscience bore the full weight. A jury of 12, delivering its own verdict when the law had failed. He laid the dagger on the table, the one found hidden in Foscarelli's luggage. Some struck with the right hand, some with the left. Some weakly, some with force. The variety was deliberate to confuse. The handkerchief, the burned note, the stopped watch, all planted to suggest an outsider or a single killer. Linda Arden spoke first, her voice rich and steady. You have us, Monsieur Poirot. We do not deny it. We planned it for months. When Victor learned Cassetti had accepted the tournament invitation, we knew this was our chance. The snowstorm was luck, extra time, No immediate police. Princess Dragomirov added, "He was a monster. Monsters do not deserve trials." Count Andrenyi said fiercely, "My wife lost her entire family to that man. I would do it again." Poirot raised a hand. "And yet, you are not monsters. You are decent people driven beyond endurance. The law failed you. Justice failed you. You took it into your own hands." He looked at each face in turn. "I have spent my life pursuing murderers. I believe in order, in law, but I am also human. I remember a little girl of 3 torn from her bed. I remember a mother leaping to her death, a father putting a bullet in his brain, a maid hanged for a crime she did not commit." His voice softened. "I cannot condemn you." A stunned silence greeted his words. Monsieur Bouc cleared his throat. "Poirot, you cannot mean—" "I mean exactly this, my friend. When the police arrive, we shall present the first solution. An unknown assassin, perhaps a surviving member of Cassetti's gang, seeking revenge for old betrayals. The clues support it. The isolation of the train supports it. The Yugoslav authorities will accept it. The case will be closed." Dr. Constantine nodded slowly. "It is irregular, but not unjust." Linda Arden rose, tears shining in her eyes. "You would do this for us." Poirot gave a small, sad smile. "I do it for Daisy Armstrong, and for the 12 people who loved her enough to damn themselves." He gathered his papers. "Destroy the dagger. Burn any remaining evidence. From this moment, the conspiracy never existed. You will go your separate ways and speak of this to no one, ever." One by one, they came to him. Princess Dragomirov took his hand in her bony fingers. "You are a good man, monsieur." Colonel Arbuthnot saluted stiffly. Mary Debenham whispered, "Thank you." Even Pierre Michel, eyes wet, murmured gratitude. When the train pulled into Vinkovci station an hour later, the Yugoslav police boarded. Poirot met them with calm authority, presenting the official solution. The planted clues were examined, the impossible escape debated, and finally accepted with Balkan shrugs. A gangster's death at the hands of another gangster. Such things happened. By nightfall, the Orient Express was rolling toward Belgrade, then Sofia, then Istanbul, once more before its westward journey resumed. In the dining car that evening, the 12 sat at separate tables, strangers again. No bridge was played. No one spoke of the past 3 days. Hercule Poirot dined alone, a small glass of sirop de cassis before him. He raised it in a silent toast to the empty chair opposite. "To justice," he murmured, "wherever it may be found." Outside, the stars wheeled over the darkening landscape, and the train thundered on into the night. Chapter 8. Justice on the rails. The Simplon Orient Express rolled smoothly westward through the night, its wheels clicking a steady rhythm over the rails as it crossed the border into Italy. The snowstorm was a memory now, left behind in the Balkan mountains, along with the drifts that had trapped them. In the dining car, crystal glasses sparkled under soft electric lights, and white-jacketed stewards moved silently between the tables. The passengers dined as strangers once more, their conversations polite and superficial. Weather, politics, the latest films in Paris. No one mentioned bridge. No one mentioned murder. Hercule Poirot sat alone at his usual small table near the window, a cup of tisane before him. He had declined the rich meal offered by the chef, content with a light consommé and a single pear. His green eyes, thoughtful behind the pince-nez, watched the darkened landscape slide past. Occasional clusters of lights from distant villages, the faint gleam of rivers under moonlight. He reflected, as he often did at the close of a case, on the strange and terrible ways of human justice. The Yugoslav police had accepted the official solution without demur. A gangster killed by a rival gangster, an old vendetta from America perhaps. The planted clues had done their work. The burned paper fragment, the stopped watch, the mysterious handkerchief. The 12 wounds were attributed to a frenzied attack by a single assailant who had somehow boarded and escaped in the storm. The case was closed before it had truly opened. By the time the train reached Venice, the newspapers would carry only a brief paragraph. American businessman found stabbed on Orient Express. Mafia suspected. Poirot sipped his tisane and allowed himself a small, sad smile. Order had been preserved. The law had its tidy ending. And 12 tormented souls had been granted the only peace they would ever know. Earlier that evening, as the train pulled away from Vinkovci, several of the passengers had sought him out privately in the salon car. First came Linda Arden. The great actress had shed her Mrs. Hubbard persona entirely. She moved with the quiet dignity of a woman who had played her final, most difficult role. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, taking the seat opposite him, "I came to thank you again. You gave us back our lives." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, you gave yourselves back your lives. I merely chose not to take them away." She studied him for a long moment. "Do you regret it?" He considered. "Regret? No. Unease? Yes. Always. The law is not perfect, but it is the law. When private persons take justice into their own hands, civilization trembles. And yet you let us go." Poirot's eyes softened. "Because I saw in each of you not murderers, but grieving parents, siblings, friends. I saw what Cassetti had destroyed. There are times, madame, when the heart must overrule the head, or one is no longer human." She pressed his hand briefly, then left without another word. Colonel Arbuthnot and Mary Debenham came together. They stood side by side, no longer pretending detachment. "We're getting off at Milan," the colonel said quietly. "Mary and we've decided to marry. The nightmare is over, thanks to you." Miss Debenham added, her voice low, "I used to dream of Daisy every night. Last night, for the first time in years, I didn't." Poirot bowed. "Then go with my blessing. Live well. That is the best revenge." Princess Dragomirov was carried in by Hildegard Schmidt. The old woman fixed Poirot with her piercing gaze. "You are a sentimental fool, little Belgian," she declared, "but a noble one. I shall remember you in my prayers, if I believed in prayer." Poirot chuckled. "Princess, your approval is worth more than any medal." Even Pierre Michel, the conductor, paused in the corridor to murmur his gratitude. "My sister can rest now, monsieur, thank you." One by one, they all came. Quiet words, clasped hands, eyes that held both sorrow and relief. By the time the train crossed into France, the farewells were complete. Now, in the quiet dining car, Poirot finished his tisane and rose to retire. As he passed through the corridor toward his compartment, he encountered Victor Armand, lingering near the bar. The tournament organizer raised a glass of champagne in salute. "To the greatest player of all," Armand said softly. "You held the winning hand and chose not to play it." Poirot paused. "Monsieur Armand, you gathered them together, you created the circumstances. In a way, you are the most guilty and the least." Armand's smile was wry. "I lost a godchild, too, though no one knew. And I have no one waiting for me at journey's end. Perhaps that is punishment enough." Poirot regarded him thoughtfully, then continued on his way. In his compartment, he prepared for bed with his usual meticulous care. Pyjamas laid out, clothes folded precisely, moustache waxed to perfect points. He climbed into the berth and drew the blanket up to his chin. The train rocked gently, its rhythm soothing now, no longer ominous. Poirot stared into the darkness and allowed his little grey cells one final review. Had he done right? The law would say no. A murderer, or 12 murderers, walked free. But the law had failed first. Cassetti had bought his freedom once with gold. Poirot had chosen to balance the scales in a different way. He thought of little Daisy Armstrong, asleep in her bed, trusting the world. He thought of a mother's scream, a father's despair. Then he thought of 12 people who would wake tomorrow without the weight of vengeance on their souls. Sometimes, he murmured to the empty compartment, justice travels by an indirect route, and Hercule Poirot is content to let it pass. He closed his eyes. Outside, the Orient Express thundered on through the night, carrying its passengers toward separate destinies, toward new lives built on an unspoken pact of silence. In the morning, they would scatter, to Paris, to London, to Budapest, to New York. Some would marry, some would grow old alone, some would find peace in work or charity. None would ever speak of the snowbound train and the 12 stab wounds. And somewhere, in the quiet hours before dawn, the ghost of a little girl finally laid down her burden and slept. The game was over, the cards had been played, and on the rails of the Orient Express justice of a kind had been served.